So we'll enforce highway safety and reduce fatal collisions on the highway if you fund these radars, which is what DOT is interested in. So you want to tailor each application to the priorities of the funding source. That's what agency intel is. In grants world, you might hear this phrase, super circular. Don't get tripped up by it. All it is the federal government up until 2014 had separate rules for different types of institutions. They had a set of rules for hospitals getting grants, a set of rules for government agencies getting grants, a different set of rules for nonprofits getting grants. The super circular simply combines all the rules into one set of broad rules. You know, don't take the money and go on vacation to Tahiti, that sort of thing. If you're in compliance with an individual grant application, you're automatically in compliance with the super circular. So that's all the super circular is. If you want to read it, if you want to start getting involved in grants and kind of get a leg up on your competition, just Google, well, that's another way, you can just go to the website, 2 CFR 200. That's it. Just Google 2 CFR 200, read it. That's the federal statute. It's not that painful a read, to tell you the truth. Of course, obviously, I'm very, very passionate about grants, and I enjoy reading anything that has remotely to do with grants. And so that's something that you can do to get more informed about what's involved with grants. Now, a grant application can be more restrictive than the circular. Just because it's allowed by the circular doesn't mean it's allowed by every grant. That's why I say if you are in compliance with the grant application, you're in compliance with the circular. Fourth key of government grant writing, you got to write well. There's just no getting around it. You have to be able to write well. I have, excuse me, I have my Little Brown Handbook, book on punctuation and capitalization and that sort of thing from my undergraduate days on my shelf at home. Helped me research whether or not to capitalize sergeant and that sort of thing. I always have somebody outside the field read my proposals, particularly if it's a big proposal. My wife taught middle school for 14 years, and she's an expert in her field, but she's not an expert in 800 megahertz portable radios with vehicle repeaters. And so I would show her the application to make sure she could understand what I was trying to do with the grant, because the feds, especially when they get a peer review situation going, they'll go out of their way to get people outside the industry to score the grants. And the reason they do that is because they have to be able to explain to Congress why they invested in this project. And so they like to make sure that the grants that they fund read well. Obviously, you also want to have somebody technical review for accuracy as well. Always read the directions, start to back. Again, this is not a microwave you just got at Best Buy. If you get a grant application, these solicitations that we talked about from the Governor's Crown Commission, read them. It's a lost art, actually reading the directions. You'll give yourself a tremendous advantage over your competition if you just take the time to read what the funder is trying to do with this grant. It's amazing how many people don't do that, because most grant pursuers are trying to get the funding source to fit our needs, instead of we're selling the funding source on the idea that we can help you with your need to comply with this federal statute and promote crime prevention in our community. Another way that you can get involved with grants is to become a grant reviewer. The feds hire folks from all sorts of fields to review grant applications. And these are some links that you can use to find out about those opportunities. Now, before the advent of online applications, the feds would fly you to DC, put you up at the Hyatt, give you a stack of applications, give you a nice healthy per diem. It was great, but now that everything's online, they just ship everything to you on a CD at your home, and you score it at home, and you get a little stipend for it. I mean, it is paid work. Not quite as glamorous as it used to be. Questions about government grants. What are some specific things that you would like to have if you got a check to address your needs? What are some specific things that you would fund? Are we talking about capital projects like new storage facilities? Are we just talking about new lockers? What are we? Go ahead.
A drawing room up to date.
Drying room, sure. Drying room, yep. So that's a capital project.
I want to update our interview recording system.
The interview recording system, I think, would be something that would fall in line with what the Governor's Crime Commission is trying to do in 2015. The drying rack, since that's a capital request, we'll need to do some digging on that, probably. Governor's Crime Commission hasn't necessarily bought into it, but you know, there is this other committee called the Crime Victims Committee that the Crime Commission funds, and most of that is dedicated towards therapy for crime victims, counseling services, grievance services, and that sort of thing. But I mean, I think there is a connection between making sure the evidence stays viable for trial to make sure that justice is served, and that's something that maybe we could put a unsolicited discretionary grant application together to the Bureau of Justice Assistance or USDOJ. Or the USDOJ has this one component called the Office of Justice Programs, and the Office of Justice Programs has lots of little agencies that fund grants, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance is one of them, and the COPS Office is one of them. But Bureau of Justice Assistance, COPS Office, those are two agencies that you might want to try to approach.
Air control or something like that, because it is a biohazard.
Sure, yeah, and see, that's a great example. That's a great example, because now you're going outside USDOJ. It's an air quality issue. Yeah, Diener, absolutely. I would get a proposal together, and this is where I get into my two-day class, but when we get a proposal together, talk very clearly about the agency first, who's getting the check, what the problem is, what your proposed solution is, and just send that proposal unsolicited to the Secretary of Diener. You know who Diener is, Department of Environment and Natural Resources here in North Carolina. That's what I would do. And even if they don't fund it, I think as a public servant, the folks at Diener would be very interested in learning about the issue so that maybe they could work with legislators to work something out. I always like to say grants are an effective way of dealing at your funding gaps, but they're never a fast way of dealing with your funding gaps. It's going to take a year between concept to getting the check, usually. Now, there are exceptions, but it's going to take a while.
I had a further question.
Go ahead.
With the interview room recording system, it's looking like maybe much more than $15,000. Would they still give you, I mean, like, what if I said 40,000? Would they still say, well, here's 15?
Yeah, exactly. Good question. Exactly. I always like to explain the total picture in my proposal. There is a budget section where you're limited to what you can put in there by the grant application. And so in the budget section, you'd put, we're asking for 15,000. But in your narrative, you'd say, we really need 40,000. We'll try to find the other 25 this way. Maybe you can find 10,000 through local operations, and then 5 through. COPS Office put out a fact sheet on how to find other money, and I think one of the things on the fact sheet was barbecues and bake sales. Every little bit helps, especially when we're talking about equipment. It's like building a brick wall. Every brick gets you closer to finishing the wall. But absolutely, talk about the total picture, but abide by the funding limitations in there. There was one grant that I wrote for the Highway Patrol where we wanted in-car video cameras, and there was a cap on you could only ask for up to $250,000 worth of funding. There's no match required, which was great, but you could only ask for up to $250,000. I said in my narrative, well, we really need $384,000 to fund these troopers in our first phase of in-car video cameras. But since you're only asking us to ask for $250,000, we'll ask for the $250,000. They got an unexpected infusion of cash. They had fewer applications come in than they thought, and they wrote us a check for the $384,000. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Another thing that you can do is, back to agency intel, make sure you understand the fiscal year that the funding source observes. Governor's Crime Commission observes a state fiscal year of July through June. The Governor's Highway Safety Program here in North Carolina observes a federal fiscal year of October through September. That's important because a government funding source exists solely to get money out the door. They don't want to be left holding any money, because if they have any money left unspent at the end of the year, you know what happens. Congress says, well, you didn't obligate those grants, you must not need the money and their budget gets cut. As a funding source enters its fiscal year end, its final quarter of its fiscal year, call them up. Hey, got any unspent money left around? 75, 80% of the time, the answer is going to be no. What are you, crazy? We obligated more money than we have to give. We don't have any money laying around. Apply next year. Okay, don't be put out by that. That's the worst thing that can happen right there. Because 20% of the time, they're going to say, you know what, we've had some people come in under budget this year, and we're about to revert money back to Washington. Would you like us to give you the money instead? Yes, I would love that. That sounds great. And when you do that, you're doing the funding source a huge favor, because now they're able to show their funder, Congress, ultimately, that they spent every dollar that Congress gave them. And so that's a really good lick. There was a judge in North Carolina that was dismissing DWI citations that the troopers worked really hard to get at a checkpoint one weekend. And the reason the judge was dismissing them in court was because we didn't have road signage articulating the fact that there is a DWI checkpoint 1 mile ahead. Called up the Governor's Highway Safety Program, said, hey, this judge is dismissing our DWI citations because we don't have proper signage. Do you have any money left around? It happened to be August, so it was the final quarter of their fiscal year. Do you have any money laying around that we could use to buy some signage? Well, keep in mind, Governor's Highway Safety is all about getting drunks off the road. That is a US DOT priority. So they're like, absolutely. They wrote us a check for $40,000, no match required. They had already obligated the money once to somebody else. They didn't spend it. Since it came back, the Governor's Highway Safety Program didn't have to be quite so rigid with match rules and spending deadlines and that sort of thing, because they'd already obligated it once. So that was great. So we got our signs done, got our signs put up. DWI checkpoint ahead. Speaking, 2 of the keys are the same. One's different. We don't necessarily know where these foundations are. With government grants, we know usdoj.gov is that website. We know Homeland Security has dhs.gov. That's not the case with foundations, so we got to find out where these foundations are. Now, foundations are required to give away 5% of the market value of their assets every year to maintain their tax-exempt status. If they give to a government entity, that doesn't count towards their 5% donation, which is why foundations typically don't give directly to government agencies. You can partner with the foundation, or you can start your own 501c3 that is in the interest of supporting your fellow officers. Houston Police Department in Texas was the first one to do that. They've had terrific success. They have the Houston Police Officers Foundation. And because it's a 501c3, they can accept money from foundations all over the country to support all kinds of programs for their officers. Good stuff. And you don't have to be a big agency to do that. Anybody can incorporate a 501c3, but you have to name your board of directors, and they have to stay on the ball and get their taxes filed, every year, just like we do individually. The Highway Patrol has this patrol stroll road race that they do every September to raise money for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and the road race has been in existence long enough to where we finally decided to incorporate it as a 501c3. So now the Patrol Stroll 501c3 can accept donations. We typically just accept donations in support of the race right now, but who knows what that might lead to. All right. So when a foundation reports its giveaways to the IRS every year, they do it on a form called a 990 form, IRS 990 form. And the 990 form has to explain who they are, what their contact info is, who their board of directors are, everything they gave away, who they give away to, how much did they give away, where are the recipients located, and that sort of thing. And that's how they maintain their tax-exempt status on their market value. So, to find charities, this is my favorite way to do it. Woohoo, IRS.gov. We all love the IRS, right? I'm going into their search box. They used to have a really helpful link over here on the left side of their screen that would take you directly to the page I'm going to. For whatever reason, they got rid of that link. So now I actually search for it in the text box here. I just type search for charities. Exempt organizations, select check tool. Just click on that, a couple of clicks. Yes, I want to know about the foundations that are still eligible to receive tax donations and not the ones that were revoked. Don't know why they added that step. I'm just going to write foundation, Let's see, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, North Carolina. How big is Wake Forest? What's the jurisdiction? How many people? 38,000 in Wake Forest, North Carolina. And we still come up with 24 foundations. Right there, just in Wake Forest. Now, if I searched in Raleigh, that would be a much bigger list, right? Now, the IRS is not in the business of connecting you to these foundations. And so there's one more step. Let's see if this is it. I'm just going to pick one. I'm going to hit Control C. Y'all know where I'm going next. Yeah, I don't think that's the same one. Boom. Now, you can pay somebody to do that for you if you want, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to go to the IRS site, they're going to search for charities, and they're going to look at every foundation that comes up in your immediate area, and they're going to see if there's a foundation that supports something that you're looking for. It takes some legwork, but it doesn't require registration. It doesn't require signing up to get emails.